King Charles had endured accusations, interviews, private betrayals, and years of public tension. But this demand struck somewhere deeper. Meghan had not requested a meeting, a ceremonial privilege, or permission to visit a royal residence. She demanded access to Queen Elizabeth II's sealed private vault at Windsor Castle, a protected chamber containing personal letters, heirlooms, recordings, and possessions never intended for public hands. When Charles read the request, his restraint finally broke. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The letter arrived during a morning briefing sent through Meghan's legal representative. She wanted supervised entry into the private vault, claiming that possessions connected to Harry, Archie, and Lilibet might be stored beyond its sealed doors. The royal collection, the official body responsible for many royal objects, did not control everything inside. These were personal belongings kept apart because the late Queen had considered them intimate and protected. Charles read the final paragraph twice. Then he placed the letter flat on the table and said no. His answer was direct. Marriage, title, and family connection did not give anyone the right to enter his mother's private chamber. The wording sharpened his anger. It suggested that refusal could be seen as an attempt to hide evidence, possessions, or messages linked to the Sussex family. To the king, that was an accusation aimed at his mother's memory. Queen Camilla watched him push his chair back and move toward the window. She said nothing at first. The queen consort understood that his fury carried grief beneath it, because the vault was not just a secure room. It held correspondence, records, unreleased recordings, symbolic gifts, and objects never meant to become weapons in another public conflict. When she finally spoke, he turned and asked one question. How did Meghan know what was inside? The answer lay in a handwritten inventory attached to the demand. It named 3 items: a sealed letter, addressed to Harry, a sapphire keepsake, and an audio recording made during the monarch's final year. Only a tiny circle knew that list. Charles stared at the page in silence, because the real threat was no longer outside the palace. The leak had come from within. Before leaving, the king ordered the vault sealed under a new security protocol, a stricter system controlling who could approach or inspect the chamber. He then demanded the name of the person who had passed the inventory outward. Yet the demand was only the spark, because behind those locked doors stood 4 people carrying wounds, and each believed the vault contained something that could change the balance of power. To the outside world, it appeared to be a dispute over access. Inside the family, it was far more dangerous. For Charles, the vault protected his mother's final private world. For Meghan, it represented proof that she and her children had not been erased. For Harry, it held the possibility of one last message from his grandmother. And for William, it threatened to reopen every wound the monarchy had tried to contain. Charles did not see himself only as the reigning monarch. He saw himself as the final guardian of Queen Elizabeth II's private wishes. The sovereign, the person who serves as Britain's head of state, held legal authority, but this responsibility felt painfully personal. Protecting the chamber was one of the last duties he could still perform for his mother, and he would not allow pressure to turn that duty into surrender. Meghan saw something entirely different. She believed the palace had always controlled family history by deciding who could read private records, who received meaningful heirlooms, and whose bond with the late Queen was officially recognized. To her, the locked door was not simply protecting memory, it was deciding which branch of the family had the right to belong inside that memory. Harry sat alone when the copy of the demand reached him. His eyes stopped at the words describing a sealed letter carrying his name. Hope rose first, then shame followed. He knew that seeking the message could trigger another confrontation with his father, yet walking away might mean losing his grandmother's final words forever. He read the line again, unable to decide whether it offered comfort or another wound. William received the news before a scheduled engagement. He closed the briefing folder slowly and asked whether his brother had personally approved the language threatening further action if access was denied. The prince understood why that mattered. A private request could still be handled within the family, but a legal warning transformed grief into pressure and placed the crown in a defensive position. Catherine found him standing motionless beside the fireplace, one glove still in his hand. She asked what frightened him most. William admitted that it was not the sapphire, the recording, or even the letter. He feared that any private message from the Queen could be stripped of emotion, quoted without context, and turned into a weapon against the people she had tried to protect. Camilla privately warned Charles that an immediate public refusal could make Meghan's accusation appear stronger. The Queen consort urged caution, but he heard doubt when he needed loyalty. His anger sharpened until she reminded him that protecting the vault also meant protecting the truth surrounding it. Then the sapphire changed everything. The keepsake was connected to a private promise involving the Queen, Harry, and the Sussex children, yet no official record explained that promise. When William examined the inventory, he spotted a cataloging phrase used only by his grandmother's personal household. The leak had come from someone once trusted at the heart of royal life. The family could not understand how Meghan knew what lay beyond the steel door until they returned to the moment when the first secret escaped, and the person who allowed it to happen. The demand did not begin with a lawyer's letter. It began months earlier, during a private memorial gathering at Windsor, when a former royal aide said too much in a room that was never supposed to carry secrets beyond its walls. One sentence about a final message from the Queen reached Harry. Another detail reached Meghan. By the time the palace realized what had happened, memory had already become evidence, and grief had become a weapon. Charles had approved the transfer of Queen Elizabeth II's most personal belongings soon after her death. He ordered them moved into a reinforced chamber at Windsor and separated from state papers, official treasures, and objects belonging to the royal collection. A restricted inventory meant a list seen only by approved people, and that secrecy mattered because the chamber held family memories rather than public property. Only 5 people knew the full contents. Charles held final authority. William was included because one day he would inherit responsibility for the crown. The Queen's former private secretary understood her wishes, while the royal archivist recorded each object, and a trusted Windsor custodian protected the room. Every name on that list represented confidence. One of them would soon break it. Harry attended the closed memorial tea carrying more grief than anger. The former private secretary found him alone and lowered his voice. "Your grandmother left something unfinished for you," the aide said. When Harry demanded clarity, the man mentioned a sealed letter, a sapphire object, and a recording held under personal restriction. That phrase meant the items could not be released without specific permission. Harry left the conversation visibly shaken. He followed the aide into a quiet corridor and asked whether his father knew. The former secretary refused to answer, but regret crossed his face almost immediately. He had revealed enough to awaken hope, yet not enough to explain whether the message was being protected or withheld. Meghan listened later, as her husband repeated every word. She did not hear caution, she heard confirmation. To her, the palace was controlling a personal inheritance and deciding whether Harry or their children deserved access to the late Queen's final intentions. She urged him to seek answers, while he feared that another request would bring another rejection from Charles. Weeks later, Meghan received an anonymous partial inventory. The page used the exact internal wording for the sealed letter, the sapphire keepsake, and the recording. Beside the final item, someone had written, "Release only with sovereign approval." The sovereign meant the reigning monarch, giving Charles direct power over access. She saw deliberate refusal. William saw something darker. When he compared the leaked page with the original palace copy, he discovered the handwritten note had been added later. Someone was not simply exposing a secret. Someone was pushing the family toward war. With the leak confirmed and trust collapsing, Charles decided written refusals were no longer enough. Meghan's demand would be answered directly, and Harry would be forced to choose where he stood. The meeting begins without cameras, courtiers, or ceremonial protection. Charles enters carrying Meghan's demand. Harry arrives carrying years of resentment. William takes his place between them, not as a mediator, but as the future king determined to prevent private history from being dragged into another public war. Then Meghan joins by secure video and states her position without apology. The vault contains family property, and she will not accept silence as an answer. Charles had summoned Harry to a private room at Clarence House, the king's London residence, and ordered every aide to leave once the conversation began. He placed 3 conditions on the table. The vault would remain sealed. No inventory would leave royal custody. And nothing belonging to Queen Elizabeth II would be inspected under legal pressure. Meghan did not retreat. She argued that Archie and Lilibet had a right to know whether their great-grandmother had left them personal objects, messages, or promises. Her voice remained calm, but the accusation beneath it was sharp. She said the palace had no right to decide which grandchildren were allowed a place in family history. Charles stiffened. He told her that protection was not erasure, and privacy was not punishment. Yet his control began to crack when she suggested that silence had become a way to keep the Sussex children outside the Queen's memory. The king leaned forward, fury replacing restraint. Harry finally asked the question that had been waiting between them. "Is there a letter with my name on it?" Charles paused. That silence answered more than words ever could. Harry's face changed, and years of disappointment flooded into the room. He accused the family of using secrecy as a weapon whenever truth became inconvenient. William pushed his chair back at once, but the monarch raised one hand and stopped him before anger became confrontation. "Grief does not give any of us the right to break her final wishes," Charles said. Meghan then displayed the leaked inventory on screen. The king studied the handwritten mark beside the recording and immediately recognized something wrong. It did not match the royal archivist's handwriting. It did not belong to the former private secretary either. Someone else had added the instruction after the document was completed. Harry revealed more. The anonymous source had promised a second page, proving the Queen intended the sealed letter to reach him after a period of reconciliation. That phrase changed everything. Reconciliation meant a genuine rebuilding of trust, not a formal meeting or public statement. If the condition had been hidden, then someone had manipulated both sides. Charles ended the meeting with one command: authenticate the letter, the recording, and every page connected to them. Meghan objected, but he closed the discussion. William waited until Harry had left before speaking. He warned that opening the vault now could reward the very pressure tactic they were trying to defeat. The confrontation settled nothing, because the final authority did not rest with grief, marriage, or public sympathy. It rested with the person legally empowered to decide whether the Queen's last private wishes remained sealed. Every royal conflict eventually reaches the same unforgiving question: who truly holds the power? The answer is not Meghan, Harry, William, or even the advisors gathering around the dispute. The final authority belongs to Charles, yet the key in his hand carries more than sovereign control. If he opens the vault, he risks surrendering to pressure. If he keeps it closed, he may deny his son the final words of a grandmother he adored. The royal archivist delivered the legal position in a documented briefing. Queen Elizabeth II's private possessions had been placed under a sovereign restriction, meaning the reigning monarch could control access while still obeying any personal instructions attached to individual items. Meghan had no independent right to enter the chamber. Harry, however, could receive something clearly intended for him if Charles approved its release. Charles remained alone after the advisors left. He opened the authorization file and found his mother's signature at the bottom of the final instruction sheet. The king touched the ink with one finger, removed his reading glasses, and closed his eyes. Protecting the vault mattered, because surrendering under legal pressure could weaken every future royal safeguard. But denying the letter without examination could turn duty into cruelty. Camilla entered quietly and urged him to separate his anger toward Meghan from the question of Harry's message. The Queen Consort said a private letter should be judged by the late monarch's wishes, not by fear of what might happen afterward. Charles reacted sharply. He accused her of underestimating how quickly grief could become a headline, a public interview, or a commercial weapon. William supported keeping the chamber closed, yet he challenged his father with careful force. The prince warned that refusing even to authenticate the letter could make the crown appear vindictive. Authentication meant confirming that an object was genuine and untouched. His words created a rare tension between father and heir, because both wanted to protect the monarchy, but disagreed over what protection required. The archivist then revealed two troubling discoveries through the sealed inventory report. The sapphire keepsake was described only as a gift for the younger generation of the family. No child had been named, making the object emotionally powerful, but impossible to assign without dispute. The audio recording carried even greater danger. Its sealed description said the Queen had spoken about reconciliation, royal duty, and the damage caused when private pain became public retaliation. Charles understood that one sentence taken out of context could ignite the conflict again. He finally made his decision. The chamber would open only for authentication, and no Sussex representative would be present. Then security checked the access log. An unexplained entry appeared from 3 nights earlier. Someone had reached the Queen's final sanctuary before the King's order was issued, turning a family dispute into a crisis of betrayal inside the palace itself. The security officer reads the access log once, then again, hoping the timestamp is an error. It is not. At 11:43 p.m., 3 nights before Meghan's demand reached Charles, the outer security system recorded an authorized entry into the Queen's private vault. No inspection had been scheduled, no transfer had been approved, and when the chamber is finally opened under royal supervision, one archival container is no longer facing the direction in which it had been sealed. Windsor security confirms that the entry code belonged to the trusted custodian responsible for maintaining the vault's environmental systems. Those systems control temperature, moisture, and air quality so fragile letters, recordings, and personal objects do not decay. The custodian insists he never entered that night. Then he reveals something worse. His physical access card vanished briefly during the memorial gathering, and returned before he noticed. Charles acts at once. He freezes every movement connected to Queen Elizabeth II's possessions and orders separate interviews with each person who attended the Windsor gathering. The king understands why speed matters. If one item has been disturbed, every private instruction inside the chamber could be questioned, and the crown could no longer guarantee that his mother's final wishes had remained untouched. William enters with the royal archivist, and immediately notices the container holding Harry's letter has shifted. The prince presses his jaw tight, and asks whether the seal itself was broken. The archivist kneels beside the case, studies the adhesive edge, and answers carefully. Someone opened the outer container, then tried to restore it. Harry receives the news through a recorded security briefing sent directly to him. His anger turns away from Charles for the first time. Someone had touched the message before he even knew it existed, using his grief to push father and son toward open war. The Duke demands the identity of the intruder, not immediate access to the letter. Meghan reacts differently. She believes the security breach gives the palace another reason to delay, but Harry refuses to support that argument. He tells her they cannot demand the release of material whose integrity is uncertain. She hears surrender. He sees caution. Their disagreement exposes a fracture between urgency and trust. The forensic report delivers one relief and 2 shocks. The inner envelope remains untouched, but the outer container was opened and resealed. Investigators also conclude that the leaked inventory was photographed during that unauthorized entry. Then the corridor record identifies the person who borrowed the custodian's card. It was the former private secretary, the same man who first told Harry about the unfinished message. Charles orders the aide brought before him. Harry immediately requests a private conversation first, convinced the betrayal may have come from loyalty to the Queen rather than hostility toward the crown. For the first time, father and son are no longer fighting over the locked door. They are moving toward the same truth, and that shared purpose creates the opening neither expected. There are no lawyers in the room, no screens, and no advisors waiting to shape the conversation. Charles and Harry sit opposite each other, with the sealed letter resting between them. For years, every exchange has carried the weight of interviews, accusations, duty, and distance. Now only one question matters. Did Queen Elizabeth II want her grandson to receive her final words, or did someone exploit her memory to force open a door she deliberately closed? The former private secretary has already given his account in a recorded palace interview. He admits taking the custodian's card and entering the outer vault area to photograph the inventory, but he denies touching Harry's letter. The aide says he acted because the Queen's written instruction required genuine reconciliation before delivery, and he feared Charles would postpone that moment forever. Charles listens without interruption, then sends the man away. The king understands what reconciliation means here, not a public statement, not a legal agreement, but an honest rebuilding of trust between two people. That condition matters because his mother had not left a simple gift. She had left a test. Silence stretches between father and son. Charles finally asks whether Harry came for the letter or for another victory over the palace. The question lands hard. The Duke does not raise his voice. He says he came because he cannot bear the thought that his grandmother spoke to him one final time, and he was never allowed to hear her. The monarch looks down at the envelope. He admits that he feared every sentence would be quoted, judged, and turned into another public attack. Harry does not deny that fear has a basis. He knows private pain has escaped before. That small admission changes the room, because neither man is defending himself completely anymore. Harry gives his word. The letter will remain private. Meghan will not enter the vault. No recording, inventory, or personal object will leave Crown custody. The Crown means the legal authority and responsibilities carried by the sovereign, and Charles knows this promise protects both family trust and royal duty. Then the former aide is called back. He produces the missing instruction page and explains through his documented account that the letter may be released once sovereign and grandson have spoken privately, without accusation, representative, or audience. Charles reads the line twice. They have already fulfilled it. The restriction was never designed to punish Harry. It was designed to force father and son into one honest encounter before resentment destroyed what remained between them. The king breaks the official outer seal and hands over the unopened envelope. Harry grips it with both hands but does not move. "She wanted you to have it now," Charles says quietly. The vault remains closed to Meghan, but the letter reaches Harry. Outside the room, however, the demand has already leaked, and private reconciliation is about to collide with public judgment. By sunrise, the private battle is no longer private. The demand, the king's refusal, and the existence of a sealed letter dominate broadcasts across Britain. Some see Meghan's action as a rightful challenge to palace secrecy. Others see it as an unforgivable attempt to enter the late Queen's most protected space. Yet one image captures the national mood more powerfully than any debate. Windsor's closed gates beneath a headline declaring, "The vault stays shut." Charles approves a brief palace statement before the morning bulletins begin. It confirms that access to Queen Elizabeth II's private vault was requested and denied. while a personal item intended for a family member was handled according to her written instructions. A personal bequest means an item deliberately left to someone, and that distinction allows the king to protect Harry without surrendering the chamber. The statement never identifies the letter. It does not name the person who received it, and it offers no detail about its contents. Yet the wording makes the decision clear. Meghan's wider demand for entry failed. Harry's private claim was honored because the Queen had left a specific condition that Charles could lawfully fulfill. A leading newspaper captures the conflict with a black front page showing Windsor Castle's closed gates. Across the center, the headline reads, "The vault stays shut, but a grandmother's letter goes home." Within hours, the phrase is repeated across radio, television, and public debate. A crowd gathers outside the King Henry V Gate, one of the main public entrances at Windsor. Some people hold photographs of the late monarch and praise Charles for protecting her privacy. Others argue that family members should never be denied access to messages or possessions connected to their own history. The division is sharp because both sides believe they are defending something sacred. Meghan watches the coverage and feels publicly cast as an intruder. She knows her demand forced the palace to address Harry's letter, yet she is furious that the settlement excludes her completely. To her, the monarchy has accepted the part of her argument that helped the Duke, while rejecting her right to stand beside him. Harry refuses to release a single sentence. Commentators urge him to confirm what the Queen wrote, but his silence becomes proof that he intends to keep the promise made to Charles. The former private secretary then resigns through a recorded statement, accepting responsibility for the unauthorized entry. He says loyalty to the Queen's wishes drove him to break the rules created to protect them. William publicly supports the king during a documented press response. The prince says, "Private possessions cannot be claimed through pressure, but personal messages should reach their intended recipients when clear instructions exist." The public verdict becomes unmistakable. Meghan's demand failed, Harry's claim was honored, and the vault remained protected. The world had delivered its judgment in headlines, but the final verdict belonged inside the family, where Charles, Meghan, and Harry now faced what each had demanded, protected, and surrendered. In the end, Meghan never crossed the threshold of the Queen's private vault. The demand was rejected, the security breach was exposed, and the late monarch's most personal possessions remained under royal protection. Yet the confrontation changed something more important than access. Charles was forced to separate anger from duty. Harry was forced to choose privacy over public victory. And Meghan learned that pressure could compel an answer, but it could not grant her control over the monarchy's guarded memory. Charles signed a permanent protocol before the final palace meeting ended. The protocol, a binding set of rules controlling future access, declared that no spouse, representative, publisher, or outside legal team could enter Queen Elizabeth II's private chamber. Only the sovereign, approved archivists, and people specifically named as recipients could approach its contents. The king had drawn a boundary that could not be negotiated through pressure. Meghan received the formal refusal through her legal representative. It stated that her former role as a working royal and her children's place within the wider family gave her no unrestricted right to inspect private royal possessions. She lowered the document and sat in silence. Anger remained, but certainty had replaced hope. The palace had answered her central demand, and the vault itself would never be opened to her. Harry read his grandmother's letter alone. When he finished, he placed it inside a secure case, and later spoke to Charles in a recorded private conversation. The Duke revealed only one truth. Her words were not about titles, money, punishment, or blame. They were about ending the habit of turning love into a contest that someone had to win. Charles did not apologize for protecting the chamber. He did admit that delaying the message had allowed fear and suspicion to grow. The king finally understood that secrecy could defend dignity, But without compassion, it could also become cruelty. His fury faded into something quieter and more painful: regret. William supported the new rules and the private release of the letter. The prince recognized that the crown, the authority and duty carried by the monarch, had survived the crisis not by abandoning its boundaries, but by applying them with humanity. Strength had protected the vault. Mercy had delivered the message. The sapphire keepsake remained inside, because the Queen had never named one recipient. Charles ordered it preserved in a future family trust, meaning it would be protected for all her great-grandchildren, rather than claimed by one branch of the family. Meghan's demand did not open the Queen's vault. It exposed a leak, forced a father and son into an honest conversation, and proved that privacy could be defended without denying a personal inheritance. The true victory was not that a steel door remained locked. It was that the monarch's memory belonged to neither side as a weapon. Harry carried her words away in silence, while Charles moved forward, knowing he had protected both the crown's duty and a mother's final act of love. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.